it's Richie and Dave and Ted. They said, how did it go? And what do you
Good morning, everybody. This is Martin Woodhouse, Rules of Golf. Today I want to continue on with Rule 20 going forward. We're trying to do this in a logical way that situations that are most commonly run into on the golf course, and we covered rules 20 through 25 just recently. We'll continue on today with rule 26, which is the water hazard rule, and obviously that's something that we run into a lot of golf courses down here with a lot of water hazards, lateral water hazards, so we'll cover that rule today. We'll start as we always should with definition. Be sure we understand exactly what a water hazard is. Water hazard is any lake, sea, pond, ditch, surface drainage ditch, open water course, and anything of a similar nature, whether or not containing water. So that's important because sometimes you'll find that the golf courses are not marked properly, not marked very well, and sometimes ditches, especially if there's no water in them, maybe they don't bother to mark those. But it doesn't mean it's not a water hazard just because it isn't marked. If it fits that definition, it is a water hazard. The other thing, too, is how the water hazard is defined. We see stakes, of course, and lines. Lines not so much, perhaps, but certainly stakes. The stakes, contrary to what a lot of people believe, do not necessarily actually define the hazard. The purpose of the stakes is to identify the hazard, so you know what it is and where it is. You can see it from a distance, but it doesn't necessarily define it. And that can oftentimes cause issues on the golf course with disputes as to whether a ball is in a hazard or where it crossed the margin and so forth. So it is incumbent, of course, on the committee of the golf course to mark hazards correctly. But for everyday play, that's not always the case. So if it fits that definition, it is a water hazard. So let's say if you've got a pond or something like that, or a ditch that hasn't been marked, if it's a pond and the ball's in it, it doesn't mean you get a free drop for casual water just because it isn't marked. It's still clearly a water hazard.
I think the one that would confuse me the most is the ditch or something like that that's not marked, because that. Yeah. Is it through the green or is it a hazard? You know?
Right. It is a hazard. Yeah. You can play it, of course, but the
can't
restrictions apply under 13.4, where you cannot remove loose impediments or ground your club. But the fact that it's not marked doesn't mean it's not. Of course, the other side of that too, Jeff, is that you'll often see things marked as water hazards which really aren't. I've heard that referred to. Somebody referred to it recently. Down here, it happens a lot. Resort red. So they'll mark wooded areas and so forth.
Yeah, I've seen that.
With red stakes. That's really not correct. I mean, I can understand how for pace of play it might help there that people say, okay, it's just in a water hazard, I'll go ahead and drop it here. But really speaking, you really shouldn't be marking a golf course that way. Unless it fits that definition, it's not a water hazard, and oftentimes they are marked that way. But anyway, let's move on to the rule. So I'll just go ahead and read the rule. 26.1. It is a question of fact whether a ball that has not been found after being struck towards a water hazard is in the hazard. In the absence of knowledge or virtual certainty that a ball struck toward a water hazard but not found is in the hazard, the player must proceed under Rule 27.1. Rule 27 is a lost ball, and we may or may not get to that today, but it's probably the next thing we'll look at. So, as we all know, it's oftentimes the case that you're not going to find the golf ball. But as long as we know it's in there, have knowledge, or virtual certainty. Now, what does virtual certainty mean? It isn't really actually defined. There is a definition, or rather a decision on it. It's 26-1/1. It's rather a lengthy decision, but it explains what virtual certainty means. And I think if you ask any knowledgeable rules official, he's going to say at least 90% certainty. The question you would ask a player if he's in doubt is, could it be somewhere else? If it's possible, if there's a possibility that it's not in the water hazard, then it's not. We have to treat that as a lost ball. So, and that term, by the way, is a new term. Virtual certainty. They only started using that term in 2010, I believe, is when they changed the terminology. It used to be called reasonable evidence, which was a poor definition, really, because if you just look at the dictionary definition, reasonable means better than 50%, and that, I think that's the way a lot of golfers interpreted that. Is it probable that it's in the hazard? Probable is not enough. You know, you think about virtual certainty and, or rather reasonable evidence. Reasonable evidence wasn't a good definition. The definition, the rule didn't change, the definition did. So virtual certainty means 90% certain. So let's say we have that knowledge, we saw it go in, we know it's in there, or we are virtually certain, we didn't see it go in, but it couldn't be anywhere else. We can then proceed under Rule 26. Now, there are two kinds of water hazards, lateral water hazards, which are marked yellow, and lateral, which are marked red. And the definition really is of how it should be marked, yellow or red, is to do with the relief options. So with a water hazard, which is yellow, what we're going to do, we only have two options here. We can play the ball if we can find it and get a club on it. We can play it for sure. But relief options, there are only two. And the first one is taking stroke and distance. You always have that option to go back to the spot where you last hit the previous shot from. Or the other option is to find the point where the ball last crossed the margin of the hazard and go back as far as you want on a line with the flagstick. A lot of people will do that incorrectly too, because people talk about line of flight and they'll go back on the line the ball went into the hazard, and that is not correct. You keep the point where the ball last crossed, keep that point between you and the flagstick and go back on that line, and you can go back as far as you want. Those are your only options with yellow. So with water on the golf course, sometimes, a lot of times, that's not going to be possible to do because it's physically impossible to go back on that line, and that's when we get into the lateral. So if it's not possible to drop behind the hazard, the person marking the course should then not use yellow, but use red. Red being a lateral water hazard. And with the lateral, we have a couple, two additional options. These are not different rules. These are not a different thing to do. It's an additional option. So, again, a lot of people don't realize that you still have that option with red, if it's physically possible to do, to keep that point where it crossed between you and the hole, go back as far as you want. A lot of people don't know that. They'll automatically see red and go, okay, 2 club lengths, which, of course, is one of the two additional options that we do have with red. So again, the reference point is going to be the point where the ball last crossed, and that's key too, the last crossed the margin. It could happen in the case of a creek, a winding creek, something like that. It might cross the margin several times before it actually goes in the water. We're interested in the point where it last crossed. And it's nothing to do with where the ball lies. I think you said before, Jeff, that you had somebody do that with a water hazard. They knew roughly where the ball was, and they tried to go equidistant from where they thought the ball was lying rather than use the point where it went into the hazard.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it crossed 100 yards back. It crossed the hazard, but it landed,
yes,
up to the right of the fairway, and he took the
Right.
The drop from where the ball splashed, not where it crossed.
Sure. So even if you find it or see where it splashed or know where it is, we're not interested in where it is. We're interested, well, it does have to be in the hazard, of course. But we're interested in the point where it last crossed the margin of the hazard. So with the yellow, coming back to yellow for a moment, yellow is generally going to be something you have to play over. And if you do get over the hazard, the water hazard, but it rolls back into the hazard, you're still going to have to come back on the other side. You're still going to have to come back on the other side. And coming back to course marking, it is sometimes appropriate and judicious to use a drop zone as an additional option. Again, this is not instead of, it's you may use a drop zone if it's provided. But again, as with the red marking where it shouldn't be, we see a lot of drop zones that are really not in the proper place.
And we see them actually not even marked.
Right. They're not properly defined. They're not in the right place. And again, I can understand that for pace of play issues. But when we play our tournaments, Golf Academy, we use all local courses, of course. One of our local rules, or on our hard card, it does say disregard all of the drop zones. We don't use any of them. Some of them are okay, but a lot of them are really not appropriate.
So if I review, if it's a yellow, if it's marked yellow, I have basically three options. I can hit the ball if I can find it.
Right.
I can take the stroke and go back and hit from where I hit the ball from the last point I hit the ball.
20-5, we've covered that one.
And then the other option is to find where the ball crossed and line up with the flagstick. And in many cases, like you said, that's not possible. So it leaves you with the other two options.
Right. Then it should be marked red in that case.
It should be.
Yes.
But if it's not marked red, we still have to abide by whatever those options are, right? Yeah. So if it's red, then I can do those three things, as well as take a lateral 2-club.
Yes.
As to where it went in.
2-club length from the point where it last crossed, no nearer the hole, within the 2-club lengths. It doesn't have to be the full 2-club lengths. You might be better off with 1-club length. And
okay. So, and what other option do I have with red? Is that it?
There is one other option which it's not always practical. It's not always an option, really. Opposite margin. Opposite margin. Now, what that means is, if you take an example of the drainage ditch that we were just talking about, it might happen that the ball crosses the drainage ditch into the trees and then pops out again and goes into the ditch.
Right.
So the point where that ball last crossed the margin of the hazard is in the tree line.
It was over on the other side of the ditch.
It was on the other side of the ditch.
Right.
So you certainly have that option, dropping within 2-club lengths at that point, but if it's all trees and bushes, that's not going to help you.
Yeah.
And that's where it really comes in handy to know that opposite margin.
So I can drop on the
fairway side.
That I didn't know.
Yes, that's your opposite.
Never
margin.
heard it explained exactly like that.
It doesn't always. It's not always an option, but it's very handy to know that sometimes.
Sure, it is.
Yeah. If you take a bigger water hazard, perhaps a lake or something like that, same thing. You could hit it just way out there over the other side of the lake, and it somehow kicks back into the lake, back in the trees somewhere. If you can establish where that point is, and then come on the opposite margin, equidistant from the hole, that then becomes your point of reference, and you do have 2-club lengths from that point. But let me just say this. If you do take opposite margin, the 2-club lengths is the only option you have. The option of going back on the line is not there.
I think of, every time you go through a rule, I think of a situation where that came up, and you've played this hole, number 18 at Shasberry Glen.
Actually, I have not.
Oh, you've not?
No, I've not gone out there. We've started playing there with the Golf Academy. We've been there several times. I've not had an opportunity to play myself.
The water on the right shouldn't come into play, but sometimes it does for me.
Right.
and there's woods behind it, and I did center punch an oak tree over the water, and it came back in the water.
Sure.
And I found myself on that side
Yes.
the lake,
Yeah.
trying to find a place to drop, and ended up taking a worse situation than I could have had I known this rule and taken the opposite margin and the 2 club links. It would have been so much better for me, because then I'm sitting here thinking about it. I'd have been looking straight at the hole. I mean, I'd still been a good ways away. Still been 2 clubs away, but
Sure.
it's a par 4 there. It's a beautiful hole, by the way. Got to go check it out.
I do. I keep meaning to get up there.
Yeah, it's and the green is gigantic. Of course, all the greens at Shasberry Glen are raised like that, and this one
Yes.
has a valley in the middle of it.
Okay.
So it's got 2 plateaus. But enough about that. But
Yeah.
but that's a perfect situation for what you just talked about.
Doesn't come up that often.
Yeah.
It's good to know.
Yeah, it is, because
Yeah.
had I known that, I could have saved myself probably 2 strokes on that hole.
Yeah.
But just knowing the rules.
So really, with red, there's actually 5 things you can do. Most people think, 2 club lengths, just
Yeah.
throw it. But
Yeah.
you have five options.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Play it, drop it, go back. Okay, so that covers 26-1. We're okay for time.
Yeah,
we
yeah,
can
sure, yeah.
continue on. This is an interesting rule, 26-2. And some of these rules have names. People call them names. This is called the regression rule. And this is a situation where you've had a go at it, you've decided you want to try and play it, but you were unsuccessful. You were on the banks of the water hazard, you think, I want to save a stroke, I'm going to try and play this, but you play it and dump it in the water anyway. So now, what are you going to do from there? Can you still get out of the hazard or not? Because the place where you last played from was not outside the hazard, it was inside the hazard, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah.
And that ball that you hit never did cross the margin of the hazard. It just stayed in the hazard. So now you've got a tricky situation. I'm sure we've all tried to do that and left it in the hazard, or possibly hit it into another water hazard. That could happen too. And that's what this rule is about. It's kind of complicated to read, but I'll try and explain it as best I can. Sure. So this is 26-2A. A ball comes to rest in the same or another water hazard. If a ball played from within a water hazard comes to rest in the same or another water hazard after the stroke, these are options. You can proceed under 26-1A, which is that first option of hitting the ball again, dropping it from the same place. Now, 26-1A is playing it from the same spot. Now, I'm not sure that's really a smart idea, because you tried it once and it didn't work, so you're going to drop it again and try it. However, I certainly recommend you do that. Not play it, but drop it. So take that option of trying it again, drop the ball, and here's where it's interesting, because once you've dropped it, you can then decide whether you want to have another go at it or not. You might, in haste, say, let me try that again, and drop it, and then you drop it, and it winds up in an even worse situation. Under this rule, you can then change your mind.
And you can actually change go to a different option.
And then you can go to a different option.
Wow.
Then you can go to a different option. And that's where the regression comes in, because you can regress to the point of the previous stroke.
Wow.
So all of the options you had with that original golf ball, which you chose to hit, are still there. They're still there. It's going to cost you another stroke.
Yeah, that's good. That's going to be my next question.
It's going to cost you another stroke to do that. So you can regress to the point where you last hit it from outside of the hazard, or you can take your 2 club lengths if it's lateral, or go to the opposite margin, or keep the point between you and the hole, even though it wasn't the last stroke you hit.
So let's follow this for a minute. I teed the ball off. I hit the ball off the tee, and I hit it into a hazard.
Yes.
And I decided to try to play it out of the hazard.
Yes.
So with trying to save myself a stroke, I hit it, and unfortunately, it didn't come out of the hazard. It stayed in the hazard.
Right.
So I can go back and try to drop there and see if I end up with a better situation. If I don't,
Yes.
I can go back to the tee.
Yeah, you can then
Or I
just
can go
kinda
back to
cancel the drop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
So it gives you a little look at the lie before
Yeah.
you decide what you want to do.
See, I never knew the rules could help you that way.
Absolutely.
I always thought the rules were penalties, man.
Not at all. We've just come across two where
Yeah.
that can absolutely
Yeah.
help you out. So really, you should do that.
Yeah.
It gives you a free look at it. If you catch yourself a good lie, think, I can get this one out. Well, no, maybe I tried it once, didn't work. I don't want to do it again. So you can still go back and do what you would have done before you drop that.
Yeah.
So that's the regression rule. So that's
And that's 26-1A,
26-2.
26-2. Okay.
26-2. There are just two parts here. 26-1 is the relief of the ball in the water hazard. We talked about the virtual certainty and so on. And we talked about the definition. Just coming back to the definition real quick, there are only two places on a golf course where a margin extends vertically upwards, and a water hazard is one of them, out of bounds being the other. What that means is if your ball's kind of stuck in a tree and it's it's inside the plane, it's still in the water hazard, even though it's not on the ground
Okay.
or in the water. And the opposite is true, of course, if it's outside the hazard. So those are the only margins that.
So if the tree is growing out of the hazard, but the ball, it has a limb that's extending across the line, the plane, into the fairway.
Yes.
And the ball is in that tree.
Yes.
It's not in the hazard just because the tree's rooted in the hazard.
That's correct. That's
Yeah.
correct. That would not be the case for ground under repair, because the margin of ground under repair does not extend vertically upwards. So if you've got the same thing, tree growing in ground under repair, and it's overhanging, and the ball's in the branches outside of the
repaired area.
the repaired area, or the ground under repair, it's still in the ground under repair, because by definition, ground under repair is the area that's marked and anything that's growing in it.
So I got another thing that just came to mind. In rare situations, I have seen trees in bunkers.
Yes.
So if there's a tree rooted in a bunker and a ball is in the limb, this sounds really rare, but it's in a limb which is outside the bunker.
Could happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that ball is actually in the bunker.
It's not in the bunker. The margin does not extend vertically upwards.
But if it doesn't extend vertically upwards and the tree's rooted in the bunker, wouldn't it be the same as ground under repair?
Oh, so if it's in the I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
So the tree limb is hanging out over.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, you're right. That is
Yeah.
that is in the bunker then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the opposite is if there's a tree limb hanging over a bunker,
Yeah.
and the ball landed.
Well, no, hang on
Yeah.
a second. the bunker by definition is for a ball to be in the bunker, it has to be touching the bunker.
Okay, that helps.
It has to be
Yeah.
touching the bunker. So
Yeah.
no, it's not in the bunker if it's hanging in a tree.
Okay,
So
yeah.
yeah.
I've been watching some crazy YouTube videos lately of crazy shots, and you've seen the one where Sergio climbs up in the tree and
Yes.
hits it out of the tree into the fairway.
Yeah,
you
I
know?
remember Nick Faldo did the same thing
Yeah.
years ago.
And I've seen
Again.
balls laying in really crazy places, and you think, how the heck does that happen?
Mhm.
You know, but anyway, yeah.
Yeah. You can certainly play it out of the tree. There's a few interesting decisions on that one where ball's in the tree and a guy decides he doesn't want to. He's going to have a hard time hitting the ball, so he decides he's just going to whack the branch, make a stroke at the branch to dislodge the ball and get it out of there,
Yeah.
counting it as a stroke. That's not a stroke. And we did cover that actually at 14. You're not making a stroke at the golf ball, you're making a stroke at the tree. So that would not count as a stroke.
But if the ball falls out,
Then you've caused the ball to move and you're going to have to put it back. Under 18-2. That's
Yeah.
back to 18-2 on that
yeah,
one. Or if you play it from the place it came out, now you're playing from the wrong place. So it's going to cost you 2 strokes. So trying to be clever there costs you a couple of strokes.
Yeah.
Another interesting one where a guy actually takes 3 clubs. I'm not quite sure how he does that, thinking I've got a better chance of hitting this thing if I have 3 clubs together.
right?
And that's not going to work either, because a stroke is making a swing with a club.
With a club, not 3 clubs.
Right.
So whatever impact he had there would have to be determined by the result. He
we'd come back to 18-2. He's caused his ball to move, other than by making a stroke. So there is a one-stroke penalty. Replace it, or if you play it from the wrong place, then you haven't replaced it, and it's going to cost you an additional stroke under 18-2.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So that was 26.
Rule 26 in the book. Yeah.
So
Cool.
We'll get on to 27, 28 maybe next time. 27 lost ball, and 28 unplayable. That's one that does come up a lot too, and we'll maybe spend a little bit of time on that one.
Awesome.
All right.
Thanks, Martin.
Okay. So, TGD Radio and TV are produced and broadcast by the Zeus Radio Network for thegolfdirector.com. When visiting the Golf Director, be sure to check out our featured golf course pages where you'll find up-to-date information about course conditions, specials, and much more. If you need help with your next golf vacation, just call Dave. Give us a call at 844-GO-GOLF-1. 844-GO-GOLF-1. That's 844-464-6531. All the program is archived for listening and viewing on demand. To catch up on a show you may have missed, you can click on the radio, TGD Radio, TGD TV tabs in the menu at the Golf Director. Now available on iTunes, Audio Realm, that's a new one. TuneIn, YouTube, Ustream, Roku, Blueberry, and the Myrtle Beach Golf app. Getting out there. This is Martin Woodhouse on behalf of the producers. Jeff, thank you very much. We thank you for tuning in. There's more TGD golf news and information coming up next.
I sank a 60-foot birdie putt today on 18. I dreamed I met my fate, stood at the pearly gate. St. Peter, there was man in the entrance booth. Said, son, I can't let you in, 'cause lying's a sin. You got one more chance to tell me